Thank you so much, Robert, for a great time of worship. It's great to work with you again. Good to see you folks. Great crowd on a Monday night. And hope you've had a good day. Hope the Lord speaks to you tonight. When we had both kids at home, we have two children. My son Kurt is a junior at Ouachita. My daughter Megan is she's about 25 years old, lives in Little Rock. She's married to a guy that leads worship. He was on staff at Guyer Springs for a while, then at Central Jonesboro, and he's back in Little Rock. So my daughter sells real estate now, too. So when we had both kids at home, we had days that it was their day. I never got to have a day. They thought I had enough days during duck season, so I didn't get a day. But we would have a Nikki day, my wife, or a Megan day, or a Kurt day. And they got to pick what they wanted to do. So one day, on Megan's day, she wanted to go to Murfreesboro to dig for diamonds. And that's so fitting because she's thinking jewelry. So I'd never been there. I had this idea that it would look like this beautiful park with these big shade trees and, mowed grass. And have you been there? It's like being in the middle of a soybean field. And you sweat. My daughter does not do sweat. She abhors sweat. If she sweats, of course, women don't sweat, they glow. So if she glows, she's not happy. So it's one of those days we're sitting in the dirt. It's hot. My daughter is glowing. My wife is glowing, and they're fussy, and we can't get happy. And we get to that point where, first I'm saying, let's all be happy. God is love. Let's love one another, But after about an hour, it's kind of like, everybody get up, go sit in the truck. Sit in the truck, don't look at each other until I get there. So it was a bad day. And all I found was a bunch of stuff that looks like this. And I want Pastor Paul, who is unbelievably wise and educated, to tell me, what do you identify this as, Pastor Paul? A rock. That's all we found was rocks. So we had a worst day of our life, and all we found was a bunch of rocks. And so I decided, I don't want to get a diamond that looks like this. See, every diamond starts off looking like a rock. And somebody gets the rock, and they can figure out that it's a diamond, and then it goes through this intense process of knocking off the rough edges and shaping it. And through a pretty intense, elaborate process, it turns out to be an unbelievably beautiful, refined, priceless diamond. I decided that if we have any diamonds in my family, I want to go to the store and buy them. It's not worth what we went through that day. When it comes to church members, that's pretty much how we are too. We don't want rocks. We want diamonds. And don't give us somebody that's got rough edges. Don't give us somebody that's got mud and dirt in the cracks. We want highly shaped, refined, priceless diamonds who know how to act in church and know what to say and know they're supposed to give and know when they're supposed to talk and when they're not supposed to talk. And so that's pretty much what we want in church, isn't it? I said this yesterday that in Arkansas we were just about slap out of good sinners. We're down to the bad sinners now. And folks, we're going to learn to take rocks and shape diamonds that look like rocks with rough edges, and you really can't see the pricelessness of them. We've got to learn to shape rocks into diamonds. There's been three things in the last few years, two recently, that have pretty much brought me to my knees and tell me that we're going to have to get better at rock ministry. That's the title of the sermon tonight, Rock Ministry. One is this piece of paper that I read you yesterday, that of the 236 religious groups in the state that we can find, this is not all the lost folks or non-believers in the state. This is a best-case scenario. There's a lot of those that are not believers that still say, I affiliate or associate with some church or denomination. I showed you that of 236 groups in the state, this is all the groups we can find, that in your county, Jefferson County, that there were 31,138 folks who claimed no religious affiliation whatsoever. And again, that's not Baptist, Methodist, Presbyterian, Assembly. That's not Wiccan. That's not Satanist. That's not Buddhist. That's not Hindu. That's nothing. What county are you in, Brother Robert? Pope County was 53.6% of Pope County. That's 33,078 people. I was in northwest Arkansas not long ago, and somebody said, I'm sick of y'all trying to plant churches up here. We've got all the churches we need. Really? Benton County, which is the very top of the state, 50.7%, or 112,000 people, don't claim any religious affiliation whatsoever. You come down to Washington County, Fayetteville, that's 87,000 folks. You come down to Fort Smith, that's 30,000 people. You come down to Sebastian, that's 39,000 people. You get to some counties like Madison County at 62%, Carroll at 60%, Newton County, the highest, 73.1%. Claim no religious affiliation whatsoever. Now, I'm not dismal about this. I'm challenged about this. Because I'm telling you, we see great things happen. And we know what God blesses. And you're going to see God bless some unbelievable things in this state. This becomes the face of the Dixie-Jackson State Missions Offering. Dixie-Jackson State Missions Offering is used as much as anything to invade darkness and lostness like you see here. And I think we're going to see great things happen. But folks, a lot of these folks want to get saved. They're not going to be diamonds. They're going to be rocks. I also know that at the Association Missionary Retreat that we did in February, when we had David James, our BCM director, had got a list of the BCM directors in the state, the biggest challenges that they face on their campus. I remember thinking, I know what they're going to say. They drink alcohol. They sleep in. They don't go to class. Some experiment with drugs. That almost wasn't even mentioned. You know what they mentioned? A secular, agnostic, atheist agenda that is unbelievably hostile and brutal and does not have any room for coexistence with Christians in any form or fashion whatsoever. It's not that I have my beliefs and you have your beliefs. You don't have the right to be here. You don't have the right to exist. Get out! A hostility. And the second thing they mentioned was the radical gay, homosexual, transgender, whatever's left, lesbian agenda that says you have no right to have your beliefs in a biblical sexuality or biblical manhood and womanhood. You are wrong. It's not that I have my belief and you have your belief. You have no right to have your belief. I had no idea. It brought me to my knees. And I thought, we've got to do better at discipleship. We're losing our students on our campuses in a powerful way because we have not prepared them for biblical worldview. We've not prepared them with good doctrine. Not your church, because I think your church is way ahead of almost all. Third thing that's really brought me to my knees is a few years ago when we got to looking at where we were with students in the Southern Baptist Convention and in American and Arkansas. 46,000 Southern Baptist churches, 50,000 if you count the missions. That's United States and Canada. I wanted to know how many students one church had to baptize to make the top 100 in student baptisms in the Southern Baptist Convention. And I'm thinking 46,600 something churches, I think, 50,000 if you count the missions. And we got a lot of big churches. We got churches in big cities. We got churches in New York. We got churches in L.A. We got churches in Dallas. We got churches in Houston. And I remember thinking number 100 on the list is probably 350. My guess was you had to baptize 350 students to make the number 100 of the top 100 list. I was close. I was only 10 off. You only have to baptize 35. So 50,000 Southern Baptist churches and missions. If you baptize 35 students next year, your church will make the top 100 in student baptisms out of 50,000 churches and missions. And here's the kicker. There are more students in this country now than at any time in the history of this nation. Tom Rainer, the head of Lifeway Christian Resources, used to be the Sunday School Board. He kind of does polls on the side. He's really pretty good at it. He did a poll a few years ago that said American teens are 4% evangelized. He got so much pushback, he came back and did it again. 4% evangelized. Folks, do you know what this means morally for this country? Politically? Socially? Do you know what this means? So I'm telling you, when you come to me and say, we don't want them kids in church, if they wear jeans with holes in them, you cut my heart out. I tell you what we've been doing for 20 years. As a general rule, here's what a lot of our churches have been doing. Here's our attitude. You teenagers, when you decide to like our music and dress like us, and you decide to get God at 11 o'clock on Sunday morning, we're here. And we've been waiting 20 years on them to come, and they haven't come, and we've just about lost a generation. Folks, that's brought me to my knees. Now, I think God's going to do some big stuff. But I'm telling you what's about to happen. We've got to learn that if God moves in a mighty way, and I think He is, we're beyond getting diamonds who join our church who know what to do. Folks, we've got to get good at the rock ministry. We've got to get good at taking folks who look like this and shaping them. Now, case in point, I'm going to bring one guy's name out tonight that you know, and we're going to talk about how God used him, and his name is Paul. Let me give you several things about Paul. We start in Acts chapter 9, if you want to turn, Acts chapter 9. And again, we're on the theme, filled to overflow. You are filled to do something with it. And I'm going to show you, last night we looked at working with those that are not yet in the kingdom, and your role and your place in connecting with those that are not yet in the kingdom, working them through the evangelism process to the place that they receive Christ as Savior. Now we're on the other side of that faith decision, where folks that are saved, that are brand new spiritual babies, are coached or mentored or discipled to a place of fruitfulness, to a place that they really, truly are diamonds. I heard someone say a long time ago, we're pretty bad at baby ministry. And I remember my first thought was, I don't know now. We got pretty good nurseries in our church. He said, no, I'm talking about spiritual babies. Spiritual baby gets saved, we walk by and we give them the glad hand. Glad you got saved. Welcome to the kingdom. Now, we're not going to bother you, and we're not going to bug you. But if you need something, let me know. If you take a brand new newborn baby and place him in a soybean field and give him a glad hand, we're glad you're in the world. Now, we're not going to bother you, but you let me know if you need something. You know where you'll be? You'll be in prison. You don't have the right to abandon a baby. They don't even know what to ask for. We've got to get better at this ministry. Now, there are folks here tonight. I'm going to give you some big ways and some little bitty steps of how you can get involved. And I want you to decide tonight, I want you to pray as we go through this. God, where can I step in? Where can I fit in? First thing I want you to see tonight is don't ever forget this. Rocks can be saved. Rocks can be saved. Don't ever, ever doubt that. Rocks can be saved. We're looking at Paul. He's on the way to Damascus to persecute believers. Verse 3, as he neared Damascus on his journey, suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice say to him, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? Who are you, Lord? Saul asked. I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. Now get up and go into the city, and you will be told what to do. Not everything that happened is here in the story, but this was Paul's salvation decision. He met Jesus, and he was saved. Folks, don't ever forget that rocks can be saved. Always look at people for their potential. I've never gone to see an alcoholic that I didn't think, boy, when you get saved, I got plans for you. First church I pastored, we had some folk, we had a big prayer list, and there were 6 folks on the prayer list that were alcoholics. And I decided, I had a burden, I'm going to go see these folks. And I went to see every one of them. And you know what happened? I went to the house and I knocked on the door. And I told you what I said last night. I said, my name is Sonny Tucker. and I came to see you, and if you don't have a church, and you know what they did? They got mad and said, how dare you invade my privacy? I didn't ask you to come here. It's what they did, right? All 6 received me. 3 of them got teary-eyed as soon as I told them who I was. And one broke down and started crying as soon as I said who I was. Because they couldn't believe that I took time to go see somebody that in their mind was as worthless as them. Most of these guys lived in, I've been to see bank presidents that were alcoholics. I've been to see folks that were the managers of an insurance agency who were alcoholics. I've been to see a lot of folks that were alcoholics. And I've been to see folks like most of these guys, they live at the end of one-lane gravel roads and an old run-down house trailer with refrigerators and cars in the yard. Some of these come from very wealthy families. But when you get on the bottom, it's all the same. Most of them had on their boxers, little old bitty legs and big old swollen bellies. And they'd all say the same thing, crying. They say, Brother Sonny, one of these days I'm going to quit drinking. I'm going to come to church. I'm going to get saved. Now notice their progression. I'm going to quit drinking. I'm going to come to church. I'm going to get saved. And I would say, no, it doesn't work that way. You get saved. You start coming to church, and the Holy Spirit and discipleship and the Word of God helps you quit drinking. Folks, that's the order. One of them said one time, he said, all right, I'm ready to get saved, and I'm going to start coming to church, but I need to know what happens. I mean, I'm weak, Brother Sonny. What happens? I said, just come on. I said, I've got some deacons used to be about like you. They'll sit by you. As long as you can be quiet, you can stay. If you get loud, they'll take you outside. He said, what if I get unruly? I said, they'll beat the fire out of you. I said, don't mess with those guys. When he was saved, it was phenomenal. It was phenomenal. You say, did he stay dry? Oh, no. We took him to Fort Root at least, I think, 3 times while I was passing there and dropped him off at the front door. He stayed a month, came back. I went back, preached a homecoming service. About 3 years later, he's back on the back row. He's got 2 saved alcoholics sitting beside him that he's mentoring. And he's got 3 half-drunks sitting right beside him that he just barely can sit up. It was so exciting. See, I just described some of your family. And you flat given up on them, haven't you? Don't give up on them. Had some kids in one of the churches that the bus didn't go their way. And they want to come to our church. They couldn't find a church that they liked. So I said, I'll go get them. You don't have time, Brother Sonny. You already teach Sunday school and discipleship, and you teach the children and the youth as well as adults on Wednesday night. I don't understand. I got a family that wants to come to church. I'm going to go get them. I got time. What else have I got to do? See, reaching people, it's not just something that I think I ought to do. It's do or die for me. I can't live if we don't go after lost folks. So I drove 15 miles one way to get them. It wasn't long, the daughter got saved, the son got saved, the stepson got saved, the brother-in-law got saved. The dad was the most violent man that I've ever met in my life. I've met 3 guys that were real close. He's the most violent man I've ever met in my life. He was going through delayed post-war stress syndrome, and he wasn't violent normally unless you were mistreating kids. If you were mistreating kids and you did it around him, you will be in the hospital for a week, minimum. He will make sure of that. And everybody was scared to death of him. When he was saved, it was incredible. I don't know that I've seen a change in folks like that. He had a ponytail. He was on one of our church at that time, had a ponytail. He came to see me one day, and I usually coach or mentor 5 at a time. It's always been my pattern. He was one of my 5. And he came one day and said, Brother Son, I've been praying I need to cut my ponytail off, don't it? Because nobody in our church got a ponytail, you know. Said, Steve, I really think, Steve, I don't think you ought to cut off your ponytail. He said, why not? I said, because we don't have anybody here that's got a ponytail. And I said, our church doesn't even look like the folks in the community. I said, the folks in the community are all living together. They've been incarcerated. They're struggling with alcohol. And we got all good people in our church. People can't even come to our church. They think they're not perfect. I said, keep your ponytail. He came back the next week. He said, I was over on the river fishing. About 20 kids drove up. He said, Brother Sonny, some of them were 10. And they pulled out 3 joints, and they stood in a circle, and we were passing the joints around. And he said, they asked me to come over, came over, and they thought I was cool. I had a ponytail. And they said, you ready? You want to smoke dope with us? He said, no, I would have a couple weeks ago. Let me tell you the greatest things ever happened to me. And he said, they put it out. He said, I didn't know how to lead them get saved. I just had to tell them what happened to me. He said, Brother Sonny, they all listened. But he said, they wouldn't listen to you because you look weird, especially to them. Don't ever give up on rocks. I cannot tell you the impact that one man had. I told you about the guy last night. Yesterday was that bartender. I cannot tell you the impact these folks can have. Rocks can be unbelievable, beautiful diamonds. And here's the thing. If you've got stuff in your past that have been burdens of sin, when you're saved and those burdens of sin are gone, you never forget forgiveness and God's grace. And you are so touched by Jesus on the cross and His sacrifice. If you're here tonight and never been saved, some of what I'm talking about is you. And you're going to see tonight what can happen to you. You're already hearing what can happen to you. You may have given up on you, but He has not given up on you. And He can do great things through your life. So rocks can be saved. I got to move on. I want to tell you more stories. I got to move on. Rocks can be saved. Let me tell you 3 things that happen to rocks when rocks get saved. And let me tell you now, my heart groans for this. I can't tell you, I can't express how my heart yearns and groans when I talk about this. Because this is where I spent 16 years. I went after folks nobody else went after. And I'm telling you, we are not good at this. Not radical pagans when they get saved. And it's not rocket science. Her guy said the other day, Brother Sonny, it ain't rock surgery. Folks, this ain't rock surgery, all right? It's not that difficult. 3 things about rocks when they get saved. Number 1, they've got a past. Rocks have a past that they have to deal with and many times struggle. What about Paul? Oh, Brother Sonny, he started a church. He was a great missionary. He wrote books of the Bible. That was after he became a diamond. Let me show you some rock verses. Acts chapter 7, Stephen, one of the great deacons or forerunners of deacons, the church of Jerusalem. It's a mob scene. Acts chapter 7, verse 54. When they heard this, they were furious and gnashed their teeth at him. How mad do you have to be to gnash your teeth when somebody's preaching? And I've had 3 or 4 folks that when I preached did this the whole time I was preaching. It's actually kind of comical. They thought they were just destroying me. I'm thinking, we need to have a strong neck contest because you would win. Gnash their teeth. Folks, this is capital punishment, but I don't know how they got by with this. Stoning was a legal form of capital punishment, but this is not a court scene. These folks take Stephen, verse 58, they drag him out of the city, begin to stone him. When you stone somebody, most of the time it looked like this. You brought the person that you were going to stone as a legal form of capital punishment, and you would push him off the cliff. The accuser pushed him off the cliff. That tries to inhibit or stop false accusations, and you hope the fall kills them. If the fall doesn't kill them, it may be a 10 or 15 or 30-foot cliff. They would get as big a stone as they could pick up and try to drop on the victim's chest or head to try to crush them and kill them. And then if that didn't kill them, then the rest of the group threw stones to kill them. This is a very brutal, bloody scene. I don't know how they got by with it because this is not a legal capital punishment. There's maybe some ways they got around it. Verse 59, where they were stoning him, Stephen prayed. Or look at verse 58. Meanwhile, the witnesses laid their clothes, it means their overcoat, at the feet of a young man named Saul. Chapter 8, verse 1, Saul was there giving him approval to his death. Saul was responsible for this mob scene. He was responsible for this man being bloodily, brutally killed. And it got worse. Look at the rest of the verse, Acts 8:1. On that day, a great persecution broke out against the church at Jerusalem. All except the apostles were scattered, And godly men buried Stephen. Verse 3, Saul began to destroy the church. That word destroy is a very bloody, brutal word. It's like where an animal catches a prey and just rips it to shreds. It's a very graphic word in the Greek. He went from house to house and dragged physically, literally, violently dragged off men and women and put them in prison. This guy's got a past. Let me tell you about rocks. Don't ever forget they got a past, and it's something they got to deal with. You know, don't ever let rocks get up and talk about their past in public, right? They're trying to work through guilt. They have to understand he absolves guilt. They may have to have somebody to talk to. They don't do it publicly because a lot of church folks can't take it. If they hadn't been through stuff like that, they can't take it. So anytime somebody came down the aisle and said, Brother Sonny, I got something I need to say, let's talk. Meet me after church and let's talk. We don't need to confess any sin. Your sin may involve somebody else here, and we don't want to hear it in the public. So they have a past they have to deal with. Second thing, they're very confused. Acts chapter 9, verse 7. The men traveling with Saul stood there speechless. They heard the sound. Saul got up, and he couldn't see nothing. He's confused. Just because they received Jesus as Savior, they got that nailed down. That's it. They don't. One of the hardest things that happened to me, I got saved when I was 12. I got the glad hand. Brother Sonny, we're so glad we came by. We're so glad you're saved. And they walked back. Now what? Nobody talked to me about praying. I didn't get any kind of a new believer guide. I began to immediately be attacked by the devil in my mind. You really know what happened? 2 Corinthians 4:4 said the devil blinds the minds of unbelievers and he works on the minds of believers. Nobody talked to me about confessing sin. There was nobody there for me. I love my church, but it was a weak church. We didn't have men like you guys in our church. So there's a lot of confusion. They got saved, but now what? Third thing I want you to see about those that are rocks when they get saved, they don't have any friends. They're kind of in between. There's no faith family, and they have a difficult time being accepted. Look at verse 13. God tells Ananias in verse 11, go see this guy named Saul. Ananias, verse 13, Lord, excuse me? I know it's you, God. You're talking to me directly. You asked me to go see this guy named Saul? And he says, Lord, I've heard reports about this guy. All the harm he's done to your saints, he's come here to rest. He's saying, Lord, I don't care what you're telling me. I don't want to fool with him. Those who have been incarcerated and get released go through the same thing. Families of those who have been incarcerated go through the same thing. Folks that their sins have been made public go through the same thing. The in-between time is very difficult. And then he tried to join the disciples. Verse 26, he came to Jerusalem, tried to join the disciples. They were all afraid of him, not believing he was really a disciple. I made a real intense faith commitment about age 15. And there for about a year, I was in that in-between. My running crowd had not been the church crowd. And so now, you're going to church. You're not with us anymore. Guys, don't invite Tucker. Now the church crowd is like, you've never been really a part of our crowd. I thought you were with that crowd. It's a very difficult year. I remember when one of the toughest guys I've ever seen in the world got saved. It was a wonderful salvation. He was so sincere, so serious. You talk about being an island. One of the greatest tactics of Satan is to isolate you. And then it's a Custer's last stand thing. He isolates you and he mows you down. They have a past to deal with. They're confused. They don't have friends. They don't have a faith family. Anybody close. I watch them after they get saved. Everybody goes to the restaurants after church and they just kind of stand there. I guess I'll just go home. I see it all over the state. So let me tell you 4 things that really makes a difference when rocks get saved. Number 1, when rocks get saved, they need a coach. They need a friend. They need a mentor. I don't care what you call it. Southern Baptists are pretty good about teaching groups. We have Sunday school classes. We have discipleship classes. Folks, that's not what I'm talking about. When somebody that comes from a radical pagan background, an unchurched background, gets saved, they've got to have one or two or three, a small group that acts like an individual that takes them on and works with them. It's very important. It's very critical. So, look in verse 26. When Paul came to Jerusalem, tried to join the disciples, they were all afraid, not believing. Verse 27, underline the first two words, but Barnabas. Barnabas, the son of encouragement. It's almost like he did this. He went to the door, brought Paul, knocked on the door. I'm sure they looked through the peephole. Oh, my goodness. It's that guy that's been killing people. Killed Stephen. Dragged people out of their house. Hey, Barnabas, I knew it. I knew we shouldn't even told him where we were. He's so positive. He's the son of encouragement. Always trying to help folks. I opened the door. Barnabas puts his arm around him and says, hey, fellas, y'all take me, take him. I've seen what this guy's doing. And because Barnabas was there, they took him in. I don't know what it takes to do that. It's not that hard. Just to know that there's somebody there. One of the things that really changed my life, thinking about folks that are isolated, they don't have anybody. I mean, it kind of started here. Every now and then I get this question, Dr. Tucker. And whenever they call me that in the God voice, I know it's not going to be anything I want to hear. Dr. Tucker. Director, Arkansas Baptist State Committee. When did you sense God leading you, leadership? I don't know. I'll tell you a real moment. 10th grade, third period. I didn't do it just right, but you're going to forgive me. I was a little rough. I'm still a little rough. That's one of my challenges, okay? Third period, we got a guy. I won't tell you his name. I'll say his name is Robert. Can I use your name, Robert? His name is Robert. Not his real name. He sat at the back of class. He never wore nice clothes. He never talked to anybody. He sat by himself at lunch. Tried to talk to him, but he doesn't talk back. Okay, it's fine. I got 3 guys I play football with, and we're all in weightlifting tournaments. And they had fun. The teacher had something else to do. She got to class 5 minutes late, so they just had fun with Robert. They didn't mean anything about it. But here's what they did. They'd get Robert out of his chair, and they'd drag him off the back row out of his chair, and they'd pick him up by his collar, and they'd put him up on the wall. They just act like they're going to hit him. And it's just fun at his expense. And, 25 students in the class in 10th grade thought it was funny. I didn't like it. It's never said anything. I saw the Clark County court docket one day. Came out in the Daily Sifting's Herald Arkadelphia paper. I knew his name was Robert Blank Jr. I saw the name Robert Blank Sr. I said, hey, that's Robert's dad. He's in the court docket. 5 counts. What's he in for? Public drunkenness, resisting arrest, theft of property, receiving stolen property, and something else I don't remember. And it hit me. His dad is the drunk in the trailer park. Nobody ever says, hey, son, how was school today? Nobody ever says, hey, bud, would you like to play ball in the yard? Nobody ever says, hey, you want to do something cool this weekend? I'm going to ride with my son to Bikes, Blues, and Barbecues this weekend. Nobody ever went to him and said, son, you want to do something fun? I thought all he gets is, I've never seen an alcoholic that didn't at least dish out verbal abuse. And a lot of times there's physical. If there's drugs, there's almost always sexual abuse. And I thought, I know what I got to do. Well, next day, third period, they grabbed him. They pushed him against the wall. And I got between them. I thought I'd just stop them. I said, oh, whoop, whoop. I said, guys, everybody fights their own fight. Robert will fight his own fight, but it'll be one at a time. And they turned on me and said, what makes you think you got the right to get between us and Robert? we may do you the same way. And I said, well, I hadn't thought about that. But I say, tell you what, y'all know me well enough, I'd fight all three at the same time, along with everybody else in this class at the same time. I may not take all of you, but I'll hurt some of you. So I'll tell you what, just hit me. And we'll say, I said, I'll tell you what, you don't have to hit me. Just touch me. And I probably shouldn't tell you what I said, but I said, I will shove your teeth down your throat. It is deer season. I would love to be expelled 5 days. Now, let me just tell you, that's not what I should have said. That's not what I should have done. That was not the way to handle it, okay? I just didn't know any other way to do it. Well, nothing came of it. But my friends turned their back on me for 2 months and didn't say a word to me. And I decided right then, do I want 3 goons to like me and compromise, or do I want to be respected? I decided I want to be respected. You guys don't like me? Fine. I'd rather you respect me and not talk to me than like me and talk to me because I compromised. And I walked alone, but I understood what it's like for this guy. And it affected me. Of course, you know what happened. Proverbs says, he that rebukes a person when it's right, afterwards finds more favor than he that flatters with the tongue. A couple of months when they came back, it was better than it had been. There was more respect. And then they started including Robert. Hey, Robert, come sit with us. Hey, Robert, don't sit by yourself, but let's come over here. I saw a guy kind of come out. I'll tell you what happens when rocks get saved. If somebody doesn't take them on, they don't make it. You can only stay alone and lonely and rejected so long. Last church, a pastor, I spent 25 hours a week, some weeks 22. What we figured was counseling. I found out it's not really counseling. Last year I pastored, I referred 55 people plus to a professional counselor. A lot of these folks just needed somebody to talk to. God was blessing. There were radical pagans being saved. It was incredible what was happening. They just didn't have anybody. And I set up groups. I'll talk about that in a second. But they have to have a coach, a friend, somebody there. By the way, when I was 15, God sent 2 men in my life. I wouldn't have made it without those 2 men. Men, one of the greatest things you can do is work with your students and your children. I said this Sunday morning, I say it now. There's always ladies there that are available. That's in every church. The youth groups that make it and really do great have men. With so much divorce, and my parents are divorced, even though I love them and they're great folks, so much divorce, and then you have a dad that's absent. It's one of the greatest causes of people that are in prison. I think it's a root cause of a lot of the gender confusion, dysfunctional families. Guys, one of the greatest things you can do is be there and be involved. And you don't have to say anything. Maybe all you have to do is like those men in VBS. Just smile and high five. You want to be cool grunt every now and then. Just there and care. Because don't forget, some of these folks, there is no one that talks to them about spiritual things. There is no one that encourages them to do right. There is no one that makes them feel special unless they do the wrong thing. And that's why you don't have to do a whole lot. Just affirmation goes so far. Second thing he had a group. It says he stayed with the disciples in verse 28. Those folks at the last church I pastored, I'll tell you what I did. I brought in 12 men and 12 women. I said, I'm going to spend 6 hours in training with you guys, and then I'm going to hand you out gender-based partners. Sometimes it will be a group, sometimes just 1-to-1, 1-to-2. And on Wednesday night during the meal, I want you to take, I had one of our deacons, I'll give you 1 guy or 2 guys, just take them in a room and just eat with them. 25 minutes, you just talk and pray. It's life-changing. I wish I'd have had time to do more of that. Sometimes they say, Brother Sonny, I didn't do anything. I sat and listened. And they get teary-eyed and say, it's the best 30 minutes of my life. I didn't do anything. I just, yeah, great. Third thing they need a steady diet of the Word. They have got to be in the Word of God. It's more than just friendship. They got to be in the Word of God. Galatians chapter 1, Paul spent 3 years in the Arabian desert, somewhere around verse 27, 28, 29, and he was retaught the Word of God. And then the fourth thing they need is they need something to do, a role or a task. Look in chapter 11, church at Antioch, in revival. Barnabas is there encouraging them. He says in verse 23, he arrived and saw the evidence of the grace of God. He was glad and encouraged them to remain true. And then verse 25, he went to Tarsus to look for Saul, found him and brought him to Antioch. And a whole year Barnabas and Saul met with the church. Now I think he was under supervision. The worst thing you can do is take a new believer and turn them loose. But you can give them a short-time task or a short-time role, or let them work under you. Don't give them something to fail. I started working with the children on Wednesday night when I was 15. So amazing. I remember. I hadn't thought about this till over here. Pastor's wife didn't like those kids coming on Wednesday night. She thought our church was not for children like that. I mean, the first time I started working with community kids, there's always folks who don't like it. She didn't like it. She was saved right before they left that church. I didn't do a whole lot. I played volleyball and high-fived. I'd take some of them. We had cows. We fed cows during the week. I'd take them with me to feed cows. They'd throw mud on each other and cow piles on each other. It was fun for them. That wasn't fun for me. Just to be with a guy that loves Jesus and treats them with respect and doesn't offer them alcohol and tell them dirty jokes. I was the only guy in their life that spent time with them that loved Jesus. And it was life-changing. I started teaching Sunday school when I was 16. That was probably too much. They put too much on me. But a short-time task or role. Now, let me bring this down. Let me unpack this thing. Don't miss what I said. Men, you've got to be involved with the students and the children. They got to have you. It's not going to work if they don't have you. Understand that when some of these folks that are rocks get saved, they've got to have a pretty tight group. I'm not talking about a Sunday school class. I mean a group that talks to them, prays with them, keeps them going on a regular basis, encourages them, checks on them, see how they're doing. We do that with different groups. We have a ministry called Kaleo to students that are sensing a call to ministry. Let me tell you what got me. Going all over the state preaching, I'd meet a kid come up after service, maybe a young lady, maybe a young man. They'd say this, Brother Sonny, God's called me to ministry. Great. Have your pastor talk to you any? Anybody ever talk to you? But really, Brother Sonny, I heard this about half a dozen times. I don't think I can go in ministry because I'm not sure if my parents can afford for me to go to Williams or Ouachita. Well, you can be in ministry and not go to Williams or Ouachita. Are you serious? Yeah. Folks, it's basic. It's basic. But there are groups that have got to have somebody to walk with them and to help. And you can be one of the ones that's there. So, let me stop here. We talk all you want to about Paul the Apostle, how great he was. Don't ever forget. He started off here. And if you don't have Barnabas, you don't have Paul the Apostle. If you don't have Barnabas, you don't have Paul the Apostle. I probably told you this story 6 years ago when I was here. I'm going to tell it again. Let me tell you about the greatest children's worker I've ever seen. She was in my church I was raised in. She was Miss Barnabas. I don't know how old she was. I thought she was 100 years old when I first saw her. And she lived 15, 20 more years after that. She weighed about 75 pounds. She had one eye. She lost an eye chopping wood in the Great Depression. Of course, no chance for a prosthesis, just a sunk-in place. She rode a golf cart everywhere she went if it was pretty. Wide open. Our parents taught us if you're driving and her name was Aunt Nellie. I didn't know whose aunt. I thought that was her real name when I was a kid. I don't know whose aunt she was, but at that time, if you see Aunt Nellie coming, on the golf cart, don't pull over on the side of the road. Pull in the driveway because she can't see out of the one eye she's got. She would wave at stumps and bushes thinking it's people. But in her mind, you don't pass anybody up. We had a bunch of kids coming. Just tough kids. She went to Sunday school with her buddies, sat with her buddies and preaching. When the preacher went to the back door, her ministry kicked in. She went to the back door with him. Her job was to grab every young person she could grab and affirm them. Don't worry about kids knocking her down. You get Aunt Nellie's way, she'll knock you down to get the kids. She's on mission. Here's what she'd do. She'd hobble over. I'll use your brand. She'd grab your hand. She'd hit your hand. That hurts, doesn't it? She hit your hand hard. Don't you look off. She'd put that one eye right there. Buddy, when that one eye is right there in your face, you are looking at that one eye. And here's what she'd say. She'd give you about 10 seconds. But it was dynamite. It wasn't any minced words. This wasn't idle talk. This came from our heart with as much passion as anything that anybody has ever told you in your life. And she'd say, you are so handsome, and I love you, and God's got plans for you, and don't you ever forget that. She'd say, young man, you are so wonderful, and you hang in there, I'll pray for you every day. And she'd say, young lady, you are beautiful, beautiful, and you are so great. You hang in there, God's going to do big stuff. She'd say, young man, you are great. She'd go over and she'd say, young man, oh, I love you, I love you, I love you. Don't ever give up on Jesus. She'd say, ma'am, she'd say, you're so beautiful, just hang in there. And when they were gone, she was through. Cute story to you. I'll tell you the rest of the story. Some of the girls she told were beautiful. They're the girls that everybody made fun of and said, you're the fattest, ugliest girls in school, and they were. And if you want to go with the fattest, ugliest girls in school, that's some of the ones she said was beautiful. Do you know the only person that told some of those girls they were beautiful was Aunt Nellie? And one of the guys she said was handsome, had all black teeth. He didn't get to choose his hygiene at 7 or 8 years old. That was his parents' fault. And he didn't get to pick his parents, and you didn't either, and I didn't either. And she'd tell him he was handsome. Everybody made fun of him. And some of those kids that she said, I love you, nobody ever said, I love you. They were like the guy Robert in the third period class in 10th grade. And some of those kids we know now were being abused. Some of those kids now are in ministry. All those ladies that were being laughed at, they believe in Aunt Nellie. Their moms, almost every one of them, take their kids to church and read their kids the Bible. Some of those guys, chief of police, head of the fire department, head of an outdoor sportsman's ministry in the state. It's incredible. I'll tell you about us kids, that little community. When we get to heaven, Abraham, don't get in my way. You ain't nothing yet. Isaac, don't want to see you. There's about 25, 30 kids from that little community. We want to see Aunt Nellie first. May I ask you a question? How smart you got to be to do that? How many speaking classes and training courses you got to have to do that? You don't have to. It takes two things. It takes this. And then it has to come out. If it doesn't come out, it doesn't count. It's got to come out here. It's got to come out here. It's got to come out here. Rocks. Tell you what rocks are. They're really diamonds when Jesus gets a hold of them. But Jesus has got to have somebody to connect with them right off the bat. And that can be you. Would you decide tonight to be involved in the rock ministry? Would you stand to your feet and bow your head? Father, speak and move. This is as much education and awareness. There's also young folks here that every day is a struggle. There's young adults coming to this church that every friend they have is a partier. They don't have anybody to go out with after church on Sunday night because they don't know anybody yet. And They don't know if they'd fit in a Sunday school class or not. And they're struggling with different things, and they don't have anybody to pray with. We're not asking for spiritual giants here, just somebody to be a Barnabas or an Aunt Nellie. Just say, I'm praying for you. I love you in the Lord. Thinking about you. You can do it. Speak, Lord, to Barnabas's and Aunt Nellie's all over this place tonight to be involved with rocks. Bless our response time. In your name we pray. Amen.